And I'm going to share my screen, except I'm trying to get it to show me which is which because I want to share a specific screen. Okay. Let me go back here. So I always, the webinar today is about the pre-college and higher ed Nevada NASA Space Grant funding programs for faculty. What I will do is I will show where to find our solicitations, and I will briefly go through one of the solicitations and hit the high points. And then we'll take a quick look at the other solicitation because it's two separate programs, the higher ed and the pre-college. And then we'll take a question. So that's the format that we follow for this. And this meeting is being recorded. So for those who can't attend, we'll post the recording. So I always like to start here. This is our website for the Nevada NASA programs, and you can easily find it. You can see the URL at the top of the screen there, but I always just type Nevada NASA programs into Google, and it's always the top hit, and that's how I get there. And then all of our funding programs are here on the top heading where it says funding opportunities. So if you click there, it'll show our student programs, and then it'll show, if you scroll down, it'll show our faculty programs. So what we're going to be talking about in this meeting today are these two programs that are in the middle of my screen here, the 2025-26 pre-college teacher training and hands-on training faculty competition, and then the higher education curriculum development and hands-on training competition. So I'm going to use the higher ed as the example, and then we'll come back here at the very, after I've gone through the higher ed one, and we'll take a quick look at the pre-college one. So to find the actual solicitation, just click learn more about this opportunity, and that takes you to the website for this particular competition. So here are the details. And then the actual full solicitation is in a link down at the bottom. So if you click that where it says full solicitation down there, that takes you to the PDF file with the full set of instructions. And all the content that is here on the screen is also in the full solicitation document. So I'm going to go there now. And so I already have it open here. So this is the PDF file with the full solicitation. And again, this is for the higher ed one. On the front matter here, I want to make note of the deadline. So this solicitation has a deadline of February 28. We have moved up the deadline. So if you've responded to these programs before, typically we've had deadlines in March for these programs. For the faculty programs this year, we've moved up our deadlines by at least 2 or 3 weeks. And that's in response to pressure from NASA to basically spend the money faster, where we've been getting increasing pressure over the last few years to increase the rate at which our annual space grant dollars get spent out. So towards that end, we're trying to move up the timeline for some of these programs a little bit. So applications are due Friday, February 28. We'll talk about how to actually submit the proposal a little bit further down. And those proposals are due at 5 p.m. Pacific time. There's an announcement here for the webinar, which is this event happening right now. I always like to point out the attachments. So the PDF files for our solicitations always come with these attachments, and that's what this note here at the very top is telling you here about the paperclip attachments. So you can find that. I have it open here already. But if it's not open, you click the little paperclip icon, and that comes up. And so there are a variety of documents here that are valuable to refer to as you prepare your proposal. including the cover page document, which you'll have to fill out and attach to the cover of your proposal, as well as the budget template. So as you prepare the budget for your proposal, you'll need to use the Excel sheet that's included in the attachments here. And then as you go through, you'll see in the solicitation that we ask that proposals refer to the specific NASA mission directorate and ideally NASA programs or NASA missions that the project is most closely aligned with. And that helps us fulfill an obligation to NASA that all of the projects that we fund with these funds are aligned with a specific NASA goal or a NASA mission or some activity within one of NASA's mission directorates. So what you'll see here in these attachments, let me just make this a little bit bigger. You'll see a copy of the NASA strategic plan. You'll see a copy of NASA research priorities. I think this is the document that we get through our EPSCoR program, which talks about the various NASA mission directorates. It talks about the NASA centers and talks about specific research areas of interest to NASA. We also ask you to comment on how your project aligns with Nevada's goals. And again, this is in response to a requirement from NASA that NASA space grant programs meet the needs of their state for economic development and workforce development in their state. So we've included the NSHE statewide science and technology plan that's here, as well as one of the state plans from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So you'll see those referred to in the solicitation, and the paperclip attachments here is where you find those. Let's see, funding on offer. So I'm just going to work down through this document. For the higher education curriculum development and hands-on training projects, we are seeking to fund 4 projects through this program this year in either curriculum development or hands-on training. Federal funding is $25,000 for these projects, up to $25,000. And then again, because of a requirement from NASA, we have to have matching funds attached to these. And we do not have cash matching funds that we can make available for these specific projects. So we require up to $25,000 institutional match from your institution. And as we were talking about before the recording started, this can be in the form of in-kind contributions, faculty time, if the faculty salary is covered by the state. It can include unrecovered indirect cost or F&A costs. If there's any questions about ways in which you might be able to meet the institutional match, feel free to follow up with us. We can talk about specific strategies or answer questions about specific ideas about how to meet the matching requirement. Period of performance. The period of performance of these projects right now, it is June 1 through April 9. So before we started these in August, now we've moved it up to June. That's again part of this notion that we were under some pressure to accelerate the pace at which we spend out these funds. And then April 9, 2026 is actually when our federal grant officially ends. So at this time, we cannot fund these projects to go beyond April 9. If we do receive a no-cost extension on our federal funds, it may be possible to extend these projects for a short period beyond April. But we won't be doing long extensions of these projects because we are obligated to wrap up our this is the final year of our grant cycle. and we're going to be obligated to wrap up our existing set of funds and get moving on spending our next cycle of funds, which starts April 10, 2025. So that's why we're encouraging these projects to act fast and spend the money fast. Student participation is encouraged. The Space Grant Program is fundamentally a program about STEM education and workforce development. So our Space Grant projects are generally organized around student engagement. In this case, curriculum development. Obviously, you're developing curriculum for a higher ed class, or hands-on training would be for a hands-on training activity for a group of students. We'll talk about that on the next page. So we are strongly encouraged to involve students in the project, to include student participation in the budget if appropriate, and talk in your proposal about how you're going to recruit students for the project, what kinds of students will be engaged, and how you'll be attracting a diverse student body to your project. We also encourage partnerships with other Space Grant supported projects, NASA centers, or NASA scientists. So if there's a way to engage collaborators that you may have within the NASA community, we certainly encourage that. And then diversity and inclusion metrics are important for Space Grant. We would, as I just said before, encourage you to describe in your proposal how you will engage a diverse cohort of students in your project. As far as the budget, we encourage you to contact your sponsored project office as soon as possible to get started on the budget, so that if questions arise, you have plenty of time to reach out to us. We're happy to address questions about the budget. And then there's a note there that we do collect a bit of information for funded projects, including a headshot. We usually include headshots and project descriptions on our website. And I think there's more further down about reporting. Who's eligible for this? Any faculty at any NSHE institution are eligible to apply. The rest of this page is details on the kinds of projects that this specific program funds. So the two classifications are curriculum development. Curriculum development obviously is a project that seeks to establish a new or revised or updated course of materials that infuses NASA content or STEM topics that are relevant to NASA mission directed priorities within courses that are offered at NSHE institutions. You can find a little more discussion of that here. Hands-on training projects. These are projects that engage students in a STEM-related hands-on training activity for college students, again, that utilizes NASA-related interdisciplinary content, or engages in a concrete way in topics of STEM topics of relevance to NASA mission priority areas. And again, you can refer to the documents that are attached for more details on that. We also encourage proposals that include development of teams to compete and participate in science or engineering challenges, including those challenges that are specifically organized by NASA. The hands-on training program would be the ideal place to fund that type of activity. See, there's more words here on NASA Mission Directorate priorities. Last year, we instituted as part of the application process that applicants actually specify which mission directorate their project is associated with, and that's because we are asked when we report to NASA to report on which NASA mission directorates our funded activities relate to. So we do need that information from you, and we encourage, in fact, we require that you discuss it in the proposal. So you explain to us how your project is relevant to a NASA mission directorate priority area. That information is incredibly helpful for us when we report back to NASA, and it is a review criterion. So we ask reviewers who review our proposals to review proposals on how well they make that connection in their proposal. So yeah, there's more details here. I won't go down this bullet point list, but it talks about, again, more specific types of projects that are appropriate for this program. And if what you have in mind doesn't necessarily meet what's described here, please feel free to reach out and we can discuss it further. Collaboration with other NG faculty is encouraged but not required. Another announcement for this meeting, which we're having right now. Okay, proposal guidelines. So here's where it actually spells out what's required in the proposal. There is a cover page in the attachments. Again, if you click the paperclip here to see the attachments, there's a cover page form. It is a fillable PDF file, so please fill out that form. It asks you to specify which kind of project you're proposing, a curriculum development or a hands-on training project. And I believe it may ask you which mission directorate your project is associated with, but it also asks for your identification information about your sponsored project office, point of contact, and things like that. We ask that you include a discussion of results from prior NASA space grant or Nevada NASA EPSCoR funding that you may have received from us in the past. A CV, a 2-page CV, and then a summary of the proposed project. And this is a maximum 4-page narrative. And it must include the following items, including a title and an abstract. The abstract should be 300 words or less, summarizing the proposed activity. And then in the narrative of the project, please expand on these topics here. So who's involved in the project, who will implement the project, who are the participants, what are their roles, how many faculty or students do you plan on engaging or do you expect will benefit from the project? And to the extent possible, please name the participants in the project if you can. Particularly, maybe if you're developing curriculum for a class, obviously you don't know the names of all the students that will enroll in a future class. But if you're engaging graduate students, for example, to help you develop curriculum or develop lab materials or lead a hands-on training, and you know who the students are that will be doing that work for you, please name them if you can. And then the specifics of the project itself, the what. So what are the objectives? What are the methods? What are the anticipated outcomes of the project? Give us a plan for a sustained or additional institutional support. So if you're developing a curriculum, please provide any explanation for down the road, how often the class will be supported, whatever evidence you can provide that the department is in support of offering the class in the future. For example, if you're engaging any industry partners or other campus partners or other NASA center partners, please describe, name those partners and describe their participation. And then if this proposal is part of a broader activity that includes funding from other sources, please include that information. When, please provide us a timeline for the project. Where is the project going to take place, particularly if it's not on campus, some details about where, and if you're uh, engaged in an activity that's in a facility that's off campus, for example, or a specialty facility that's on campus, any kind of evidence that you have access or have a collaboration with the person who oversees that space, for example, include that kind of information. And then state how the activity will result in the enhancement and or provide training, new materials, procedures, or coursework for your campus programs. Please provide an evaluation plan to assess the effectiveness of the project. And then again, specify how the project is aligned with the NASA Mission Directorate. And please describe this in some narrative. Don't assume and just say, well, obviously this is an engineering project, so it is aligned with the Science Technology Mission Directorate. Look through the documents that we've attached and actually find some specific language that you can quote directly in your proposal that says, that describes some priority of the Science Technology Mission Directorate, for example, and say this specific language comes from their materials and our project is supporting that specific goal. Try to be as specific as you can about that. Again, that's really helpful for us when we report back to NASA on the relevance of the projects that we funded. And then the budget and the budget justification. These elements are outside of the 4-page narrative now. Please use the budget template that is included in the attachments. It has to be signed by your sponsor project office or other approved authorizing official for institutional budgets. And then the budget justification for things like travel or student hourly support or whatever details, please provide a narrative justification for the elements of the budget. And then there's some specific guidelines here about uses of the funds, and most of these are related to guidelines that we get specifically from NASA, limitations on how the money can be used. So please read those carefully. And then the submission guidelines.
Eric, may I step in for just a second?
Yeah, please.
One thing that we want to emphasize is that we do have a change in the solicitation from last year based upon updated guidelines we received from NASA Space Grant. And any graduate students working on the project receiving funding must be U.S. citizens. That restriction only applies to graduate students.
Thank you for clarifying that point. Very important. Submission guidelines. The details are here. Please prepare all the documents in one complete PDF file. Again, use that cover page attachment that's included in the attachments here. Fill out that and then put that on the front of your PDF file submission. Please follow usual guidelines for proposals. Typed single-spaced is fine. 1-inch margins. Please don't use type that's smaller than typical 12-point font, and a standard font like Times New Roman. And then we receive them specifically through a link on the website. It's back here. Let me just bring this up again. You want to click this button, continue to submit proposal. And this will take you to the page where you will upload your document. I presume that this button at the bottom of the page here is the same, takes you to the same destination as this link does in the solicitation. The deadline again, February 28th, 5 p.m. We do not accept proposals after that, and the submission is time-stamped. So, as a matter of fairness, we do not review proposals if They are not time-stamped prior to 5 p.m. on Friday, February 28th. So please plan to have your proposal complete and ready well in advance of that 5 p.m. deadline to give yourself some time to go to the link, navigate the link. It may ask you to fill out some information and then you have to upload the file. Please don't assume that there won't be some technical snafus. There have been issues in the past where folks have trouble getting the link to work or whatever. So please leave yourself some time in case that happens and reach out to us immediately if you have any difficulty submitting the proposal. Please reach out to us immediately so that we can resolve that. And finally, we ask that you use the naming convention here for your PDF file. So we actually ask that you specify, or we specify that you use exactly this format when you create the name for the PDF file that you upload. Evaluation criteria, we will convene a panel. As we talked about before the recording started, we will convene a panel to review the proposals. These panels are largely made up of faculty from the NSHE system. Often they are folks that are part of our community, folks that we have funded in the past, have participated in our programs in the past. Please do not assume that the people who review your proposal will be a disciplinary expert in your field. They may not be. Please use language that can be plainly understood by any faculty member in a STEM discipline. And this is just a practical matter. That makes your proposal easier for anybody to understand. And also it's a practical matter for us. We cannot find, we don't have the time or the resources to find disciplinary experts for every single one of these proposals. So we count on our faculty within the state to review these, and the obligation is on the proposer to make the proposal understandable to a broad audience. Be clear and concise. Include specific goals and objectives. Have measurable outcomes for your project. Please, as I've noted multiple times already, align with a NASA mission directorate and explain in your proposal how your project aligns. Again, very important for us. We have to report that back to NASA. Include a plan for engaging students. So how are students going to be engaged, especially if you're doing a hands-on project? Certainly if you're doing a hands-on training project, we want to know a specific plan for recruiting. If you're doing a curriculum development project, maybe that's less important, but you may want to include some language that explains the demographics of the students that take courses in your department, for example, and any steps that you will be taking to recruit students to attend the course that you've developed. That would be helpful. Make sure that the budget and the timeline that you include in your proposal narrative are appropriate for the scope of the work and are well justified. Again, we are evaluated against diversity metrics, so we do report on the composition of the students that are touched by our programs. So please describe in your project how you will engage a broad cross-section of the students at your institution. There's more discussion of that there. Reporting. We do require reporting, and this is very important. The information that you provide us, reporting back to us on the outcomes of your project, does get turned around and included in the reports that we provide to NASA to justify the space grant program in Nevada. We will provide you with a template to fill out to provide your reporting. It will ask for lots of information about the students that have been engaged in your program, other faculty that were engaged in your program, some demographic information, contact information for those students. And we may reach out to you multiple times because often with these projects, we have a reporting deadline before the projects are over to NASA. So we may reach out to you for an interim report. If we do that, it's because we have a deadline for reporting to NASA coming up and we're trying to gather information for that report. The template that we provide will ask has tables. We ask for a lot of information. There's also a place there to include a narrative to provide us with a narrative report on what happened in your project and what the outcomes were. And then at the bottom is contact information. We'll have to update this because it has Carol Luna's information. She recently left our program, so we'll have to update the contact information at the end here. But if there are any questions about the program, do feel free to reach out to myself. My contact information is there. Darlene, who is here, our program coordinator, you can always reach out to her, and if she can't answer the question, then she'll reach out to me. Carol, as I said, is not part of our team anymore, but Marcy is here to also help answer questions, particularly questions about budgets and finances. Marcy is our expert. Let me quickly, before I open it up to questions, let me just quickly close this. And let me quickly go to the pre-college one, just because that is slightly different. So here, let me zoom in a little bit on this. Here is the pre-college solicitation. Much of the information is similar, the same deadline, the same webinar, which is this meeting that we're having right now, same period of performance, same funding in terms of 25,000 up to 25,000 federal available, and a requirement for a one-to-one institutional match. Really, the only thing that is different here is just the nature, because these are pre-college, the nature of the projects may be slightly different. Obviously, they're reaching ultimately a student body of pre-college students rather than higher education students. So these projects take on two forms. One would be a teacher training program. So this would be a kind of a program where you would train a cohort of teachers, for example, to implement a curriculum in the classroom that utilizes NASA materials or touches on STEM topics of direct relevance to NASA. There's some more explanatory details there on this. Excuse me. Hands-on training activities can also be funded. So this would be funds for a project to do a hands-on training with pre-college students, again, in a STEM topic area. So this is if you have a project that is directly engaging pre-college students in an activity, again, in a STEM topic of relevance to NASA's strategic areas, then this program would be appropriate for that. There's some more details here. What do I want to mention too? I mean, this one, there's inherently more complexity in a sense here because you're engaging students that are not NSHE students. So you'll want to describe, make sure your proposal describes where you're going to be implementing, where the students are going to come from that are going to engage in this, how it is that you're connected to the school, for example, where the students will be drawn from that will participate in the activity. Any partners, if you have partners at a secondary school or an elementary school, that are helping you implement the program. Be sure your proposal describes those connections, those relationships, secure letters of support, letters of collaboration if you can from those individuals. There's more details there. And then I think the rest of this is essentially the same. We ask for similar content in the proposals, the same 4-page max narrative, same budget template. I'm sure this similar cover page and similar submission process for these projects. Anything, Darlene or Marcy, that I need to add on the pre-college that's different from higher ed?
No.
Okay. Good. So with that, then I will stop sharing. And if our one attendee has any questions, feel free to ask away. No questions? Okay.
I can stop the recording if you
Yeah.
want.
Go ahead and stop the recording. I apologize.